have it being 1:30 or maybe even 1:31, we now have 17 of the registered participants present. So we'll keep our eye on the waiting room. And in the meantime, hi, everybody.
Hi. We are live on Facebook.
Welcome, and we're live on Facebook. So welcome to a virtual tour of Women to the Fore with Docent Sara Kaminker. And thank you so much for being here and for your support of the Hudson River Museum. While I admit some more people. Okay. And in the meantime, I'll introduce you to my colleagues who are here today. We have Bridget McCormick, Manager of School Programs, and Olivia Cipriano, who's the Manager of Programs and Operations. And I am Sarah Linda Lichtblau, Director of Education here at the Hudson River Museum, and we will be backing up our Docent Sara Kaminker in her tour today. In a couple minutes, I will introduce her to everybody in case you don't know her already. Well, this is a little bit off script, but in case I look like the cat that swallowed the canary, I think it's a nice thing to share with everybody, people I know and people I don't know, that I just got news of a new baby that came into the world. Oh, wonderful. So this is 'tis the season, and I'm just getting texts from family and friends that this has occurred, and it's amazingly beautiful. So it's a good way to start, right? It's a good way to start any day, any program, any conversation. So welcome to a happy place here. And I think that oh, thank you. Thank you. Okay, so I think it's about time to start. We still have, let's see, we have 18 people. I don't see anybody in the waiting room, Olivia. So we'll keep admitting people as they arrive. But thank you all for being here. Once again, I'm Sarah Linda Lichtblau, Director of Education here at the Hudson River Museum. And I'm here with my colleagues, Bridget McCormick and Olivia Cipriano, backing up Sara Kaminker. And speaking of Sara Kaminker, almost 2 years ago, in 2019, when Sara won the Mayor's Volunteer Award on his day of national recognition for service, she had served 20 years, I looked it up, as a volunteer docent at the Hudson River Museum. Throughout the years, she's been committed to serving the school and adult groups, visiting our exhibitions and galleries with a warm spirit and a full heart, which will be on display today, no doubt. She brought her extensive experience as a classroom teacher to the position, and in the 17 years I've had the pleasure of working with her, has continued to learn and grow through her humility and her curiosity. She's never satisfied with her exceptional performance. She's always questioning how she can do things better in order to give more of herself to her audiences. Her preparation for tours is thorough and extensive in both content and pedagogy, and she's never afraid to try new things, learning from what works and what doesn't. In this way, she's a model teacher and learner and a mentor to other docents in our community and to the thousands of children who are fortunate and have been fortunate enough over the years to explore art history and science with her at the museum. And today we are thrilled to share her first and our docents' premiere virtual tour with you today. And very excited that it is of Women to the Fore, expertly curated by Laura Vuckles and Victoria McKinnick-Ratchin of our staff, and on view until January 3rd. And speaking of on view, I will now turn the program over to Bridget for some more information, and hope that all of you thoroughly enjoy Sara's tour today, and a very happy holiday season of health and peace and hope to everyone.
Thanks, Sarah Linda. So everyone, we're really glad to have you today for this virtual tour. Just a couple housekeeping items. The first is that I think most people are probably quite familiar with Zoom at this point. So if you could keep yourselves on mute, that would be great. There are going to be points during the tour at which Sarah will pose some questions and encourage some discussion. At that point, you can use the chat. You can also use the hand raise function, and I will help facilitate those conversations. If you're tuning in on Facebook Live, please feel free to use the comment function on Facebook, and Olivia, our colleague, will facilitate anything that's coming from that side. So otherwise, I want to make sure that you also know that the chat is always open if you want to just add reactions or pose any questions. At the conclusion of the tour, we will have some time for general Q&A. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Sarah.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Bridget. And first, I want to say congratulations to Sarah Linda on the wonderful birth. That's excellent news. And also thank you for that lovely introduction. That was very, very nice. So welcome, everybody. Today, we're going to be taking a virtual tour of Women to the Fore. This exhibit displays the works of over 40 female and female identifying artists from our collection and from loans from local artists, collectors, and galleries. By choosing to highlight the work of women, and please note that when I say women, I'm always including those who identify as such. The Hudson River Museum is choosing to showcase and support the work of artists who have been historically underrepresented in the art world. In a patriarchal system, women have worked persistently to express themselves artistically against the status quo. It seems eminently fitting to do so at this particular time. If you remember, last year was the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment, giving women the right to vote, at least some women. And in 2020, we have seen an unprecedented push for diversity, inclusion, and justice in the wake of George Floyd's murder. I am proud to be part of this museum as it seeks to promote and further the art of women, to address the inequities in the art world and promote diversity and inclusion across race, gender, and class. Our tour today will encompass work spanning 150 years and include painting, sculpture, drawing, collage, print, and photography. Since there's no way I can share all 40 works with you, I've selected actually 19 that will comprise a sample of the different mediums and time periods in the exhibits. I hope you will have the opportunity to visit the museum and experience the rest of it on your own. It's well worth it. As Bridget said, there will be a number of points during the tour where we'll stop, and I will encourage your participation. I hope you will accept my invitation to engage. I find the experience is so much richer when there is a dialogue, so there's no judgment here. Please feel free to express your thoughts. So without further ado, let us begin our tour. Imagine yourself descending the stairway into the gallery. And can we have the next slide, please, Bridget? Directly in front of you is this full wall mural, which greets you and introduces you to the exhibit. And you can see how large it is. It does take up that whole wall and part of the side wall. This mural was done by 3 local artists, Nancy Menendez, Patricia Santos, excuse me, and Katori Walker. These 3 young artists were commissioned by the museum to create this mural. Since it's been painted directly on the wall, once the exhibit is over, the mural unfortunately will disappear. All the more reason to enjoy it now. Let's take a few moments to look at it closely. There's a lot to see here. On first glance, it looks like there's 3 main female figures in the piece, women of diverse origin. The figure in the center appears to be the most important. If you look closely, you can see that she's wearing a golden crown with rays coming out of it, perhaps symbolizing the sun. Around her shoulder is the red cape that blends into the petals of the red flower, also very central in the image. The flower is reminiscent of Georgia O'Keeffe's flower paintings, which many see as representative of female genitalia. The feminine is being celebrated in this painting. In addition, the artists have added 3-dimensional flowers, which you can see especially on the sides. And I think these flowers serve to connect women to Mother Nature. And they've decorated the women with actual jewelry, symbolic, I believe, of women's worth. Look closely. I'm going to ask Bridget to go to the next slide. Look closely at the upper left. And it's a little hard to see, but with this close-up, now we can see this image here. And it's a lovely image, maybe suggestive of this, spiritual world, being in the sky and being colored so lightly with very soft colors. Can you see that this woman is pregnant? In her womb is a jeweled flower with rays coming out of it, suggesting the miracle of birth. Women have divine power, and that is in fact what the title of the piece is. It is called Garden of the Divine Feminine. So the mural that opens our exhibit was done very recently. From here, we are going to go to 2 of the oldest works in the exhibit. Next slide, please. The one on the left is called Nature's Bounty, and it was done by Helen Cyril in 1872. And the second, Ivy, was done by Ellen Robbins sometime during her lifetime, which was 1828 to 1905. We don't know when this one was done. While you examine these beautiful still lifes, I'd like to tell you something about the artist's world 150 years ago. It was very different than it is now. There was a hierarchy of types of painting. Historical paintings and portraits were at the top of that hierarchy. At the very bottom of the ladder was still life, and it is this type of painting that was considered appropriate for women. Women encountered systemic barriers in the effort to become professional artists. If you were a woman of a more elevated social class, you might go to a finishing school where you would be taught to do watercolors of still lives. But that was solely to enhance your value as an entertaining social companion, not to become a professional artist. In this beautifully rendered still life that Helen Cyril did, you see the traditional elements of a still life, the fruit, the plums, the peaches, beautifully done. But in addition, you see live objects. You notice the birds. That was not commonly added to a still life. So she's sort of taken the still life and notched it up a little. Notice also that the still life is in the landscape. So she's taken it outside. So it's interesting in that it sort of departs a little bit from what you consider a traditional still life. Now, by contrast, Ellen Robbins, the painting that we see on the right, is focused only on the ivy and the colorful autumn leaves that are beginning to fade and die. She has the leaves on a white background so that we may better see just the leaves. When we do look carefully, we are aware that the leaves are incredibly realistically drawn. This is all the more difficult given that her medium is watercolor, which is very fluid and tends to run. It was said of her leaves that they were so realistic that birds would actually land on them, mistaking them for the real thing. And I think I'm with the birds on this one. Ellen Robbins did succeed in becoming a professional artist. She always longed to paint, and so she taught herself. When her father died, she was still a child, but her illustrations were so good that she was able to sell her flower paintings for $25 a piece. From these oils, we are now going to go to a charcoal drawing, also of the natural world. I don't think the work itself will be familiar, but the name of the artist will be. She is universally known and acclaimed. Let's see the next slide. This is Banana Blossoms, and it was done by Georgia O'Keeffe, probably one of the best known women artists of our time. Unlike the flower paintings she is so well known for, this is a charcoal drawing of a banana blossom. Do you notice that though the subject and the medium are different, she brings to bear the same intense focus on one object as we see in her famous flower paintings. At this time in her life, Georgia O'Keeffe was suffering from depression. She went to Bermuda to spend some time at a friend's estate to rest and restore herself. She began taking walks in nature and sketching, and she did many different sketches of these banana blossoms. I am imagining that the process of sketching and drawing was encompassing for her, requiring her attention and freeing her from her worries. It feels very much like a restorative process. Notice how carefully she has rendered the banana blossoms, just as the other two previous artists did in their still lives. Notice also the softness the charcoal lends to the drawing and the subtle shading that it allows. It really is a beautiful piece. From here, we are now going to go and see the work of an artist who combines elements of the past and the present into her works. Next slide. This is a work by Ebony Bolt done in 2017. Let's look carefully at this work. The feature that immediately claims your attention are the colorful flower and bird patterns. They are based on Victorian patterns like those of William Morris. But if we look more closely, we can see something else in her work. So we're going to look at the next slide, which shows a close-up. There we go. So now you can see much more clearly that Ebony Bolt has included drawings, contemporary drawings in this piece. Ebony Bolt sketches in the city, often as she rides the subway. She covers her work so that other riders are not aware of what she is doing, and she has filled many a sketchbook that way. It's interesting how she has incorporated these contemporary drawings into the larger Victorian style nature-themed patterns and chosen to showcase it in a light box so that the whole thing is illuminated. Now here is where I'd like to invite you into the discussion. I'm wondering what you're thinking about the juxtaposition. Why has she included both of these disparate elements into one work? What do you think she might be trying to express? And just to throw something else into the mix, she titled this Botanical Dreams in the Concrete Jungle. Maybe that will help you in your thinking. So feel free to respond. So I'm imagining that no one is responding to that. So I will tell you what Ebony Bolt had to say about that. She feels that, oh, I'm sorry, I think,
Yeah. And Sarah, I do have someone in the chat, Catherine, saying that it's almost like the juxtaposition of people and the ethereal.
yes, very good. Yes, I like that. Does anyone else have any thoughts about this?
Sarah Linda just mentioned in the chat that it relates to the theme of our other exhibition, landscape art and virtual travel. We'll speak more to that at the conclusion of this program. Frederica mentioned in the chat that while riding the subway tired after work, people are dreaming of better, beautiful things.
Very interesting. Yes, and better beautiful things, I think, are nature. And when you add to that people in the city don't have a lot of exposure to nature, I think that these beautiful images are restorative and calming. So thank you for that. And anybody else have any thoughts that they want to share before we move on?
Sue says that in the chat that she loves the symmetry of the piece.
Oh, wonderful. I'm so glad to hear these comments. All right, so thank you for your participation, and there will be other points where you can join in. I hope that you'll feel free to do so. From still lifes and Victorian style patterns and line drawings of people, we will now move to works that explore the material world around us. The next two artists explore that world in different mediums, but neither artist is content to just represent what they see as it exists. They each seek to change the flat image, but each does it in a different way. So let's see the next slide. And this is called this is called From Another Room by Mural Perlmutter. This is an intaglio print. Clearly, this is not a realistic depiction. Notice how the walls curve and the windows bend. And in reality, you would not be able to see down the hallway into the room at the end. Look closely. You'll notice something not easily discernible in the darkened space before the corridor. Now, you can't really see it when you're looking at the whole image, but we're going to move to the next image and you will, I think, be able to discern what it is. Next slide. Yes. I think it's very clear now that there's somebody standing there in the shadows, and just as and you can and the artist Mural Perlmutter has said that in fact is her. She says, "I wander through space and time on a flat sheet of paper, traveling around corners and deep into dark, mysterious spaces." And I'm suggesting that she has placed herself deep in the dark, mysterious places of this work of art. The development of the image, she says, takes me on a journey from the realm of realism to abstraction and back again, moving to one only with regard for the other, nailing down that edgy off-balance result I'm aiming for. Next slide, please. Now you can see the whole print, and you can also see the image of the woman. As I continue to look at this, I appreciate that off-balance result that Mural Perlmutter was striving for. I find it charming the way the walls bend and the windows curve. And it makes me think of a fun house with the kind of mirrors that distort your image. Or I feel like maybe I have wandered into Alice in the Looking Glass. I wonder what it evokes for you. From the inside rooms of a building, we're now going to move to the outside architecture of another. Next slide, please. Susan's Leopold medium is photography, but she also plays with the idea of a traditional straight depiction, but in a very different way from that of Mural Perlmutter. This is Castle. It's actually Bannerman's Castle by Susan Leopold. I'm sorry that you cannot see this piece in the gallery because it really needs to be experienced directly to fully appreciate it. You'll notice that she has mirrors in a triangular shape attached to the center of the photograph. And she also has arms that project out. That creates a three-dimensional effect. You feel like the castle is all around you. You're actually standing in that space. So you experience it much more fully than were you just looking at a flat photograph on the wall. You're in that space, almost. The artist likes to depict abandoned structures. She sees their magnificence in spite of the decay. In her own words, I strive to capture the poetry of decay found in once proud buildings slowly being reclaimed by time, and acknowledge how nostalgia is innately embedded in these structures. And I'm wondering, are these buildings symbolic of anything else? What do you think about when you look at a beautiful, now abandoned building? Do you imagine who lived there, what it looked like in its heyday, what happened in and around it, what was it used for? Susan Leopold allows us to make up our own stories. So far, we've looked at basically two-dimensional art that's not figurative, but women artists did not stop there. Using many different types of mediums, they extended their reach into figurative works and beyond. Next slide, please. So this is our first figurative work. It's a sculpture done by Evelyn Longman. And this was done in 1908. She titled her sculpture Victory, and she created it for the St. Louis Exposition in 1904. The sculpture that we're looking at here is cast in bronze, but it was done after the exposition. This is not what was shown at the fair. That would have been a monumental work, cast in plaster, and it would have continued to exist only in photos after the exhibition closed. This sculpture was very well received by the public, so well received that it was moved from a side building, its original site, to stand by one of the main buildings at the exposition. And she received a silver medal for her work. It's interesting to note that Victory was traditionally portrayed as a woman. So I'm wondering, why did she choose to break with that tradition? Was she demonstrating independence by making this non-traditional choice? Was she looking to please the men who undoubtedly were judging her work? What do you think? So this sculpture was done in 1904, over 100 years ago, but our next sculpture was done just last year, but it's also a statue of Victory. Before I show you the next sculpture, which was done by Vinnie Bagwell, I want to share with you a photo of another sculpture. Let's have that next slide, please. This sculpture, as you can see, was recently removed from its pedestal. This is a statue of J. Marion Sims, known as the father of gynecology. He is known for inventing the speculum and for developing surgical procedures to repair fistulas. A fistula is a wound between the bladder and the vagina that can occur during childbirth. You are wondering why his statue was being taken down in the way that many Confederate statues have been removed recently. This, by the way, was standing in Central Park, about 102nd Street. The reason it was taken down is he learned to do these procedures by experimenting on the bodies of Black women slaves, often without anesthesia. Once it came down, there was a competition to design a new statue, and Vinnie Bagwell won the competition. Next slide, please. This is the statue that Vinnie Bagwell designed. She titled it Victory After Sims. What we are looking at is not the actual sculpture, but a maquette, a smaller model made by the artist before creating the much larger finished work. It's a beautiful statue. In this sculpture, Vinnie Bagwell fittingly returns to the traditional use of a woman as a symbol of victory. But in this case, it's definitely a Black woman. Let's look more closely at this maquette. Next slide, please. The surface of this maquette is not flat, as in the previous victory we looked at. There are raised images on her dress. And I would love you to respond, to tell me what you're seeing, what these images are. You can write in the chat, and you can also raise your hand, and Sue will, and Bridget will unmute you. So look carefully at the images here, and Bridget is going to move to the next slide, please, because we have some more close-ups of this. And you'll notice on the left, there's a closer up, a better closer up of the dress, the front of the dress. And on the right, there is a close-up of the back of the dress. So you really can see the images that she sculpted. So now I'm going to ask Bridget to go back to the first slide. And would anybody like to talk about what they see?
So Sarah, we have a bunch of comments in the chat, and people are observing faces of enslaved people, women,
Yes.
a ship.
Yes.
There's a comment that these are probably there to represent the women who were mutilated by Sims.
Yes.
And there's agreement with that general observation. There's
Right.
also just overall comments about how exquisite this work is.
Yes.
And the context that you gave for the statue, people are very glad to hear that the original statue of Sims was removed, and that this took place. So those are some general comments. Again, you can use the hand raise function if you'd like to speak, but I'm happy to read aloud chat. So continue on as Sarah continues to facilitate.
Yes. Thank you, Bridget, and thank you all for your comments. We're going. I want you to. We have. It's clear that we figured out the slaves and the slave ship, but I also want you to think about some other elements of this beautiful sculpture. Think about the flame that she's holding so protectively in her hand. What is it, and what is the significance of it? What are you thinking? And let me throw out a couple of other things so you can think about all of these things together. If you look at the staff that she's holding, I don't know if you recognize the symbol on it, but it's a symbol of the medical profession. And lastly, this victory has wings. Our previous victory did not have wings. So what's the significance for her of including the wings? I'd love to hear what you're thinking about this.
Again, let's see. Any reactions to that question about the wings and what that might mean? We also have a question in the chat, Sarah, and I'm actually I may even call on Sarah Linda for this one, but the question is, how are the flames created? Because if I go back one more slide, you can see the maquette on site at the museum. And so you do see that it's not just an illustration or part of a markup. So I'm not sure, Sarah Linda, do you know, it might be just gilded bronze. We can also look back into that if we need to and find out from our curatorial team.
Yes, I would imagine. I don't know for sure. It's a great question.
Yeah.
Thank you. I believe that the flame, that the artist intends for the flame to be an actual flame once the work is installed just outside Central Park at 103rd Street near the conservatory. I think that's the intention, but I don't know. This is a really good question.
And then I do have a response to Sarah's inquiry about the wings. Barbara states that the wings might represent freedom.
Oh, excellent thought. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah.
And Sue, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Sue suggests that the women who were sacrificed were angels and we remember them.
Excellent. Excellent. I love hearing these ideas.
Connie writes that the flames light the way for the future and the wings lift us up.
Excellent.
And then Sandy, who attended a prior lecture, likely with curatorial team Laura and Victoria, states that the flames will be an eternal flame, actual fire. So yeah, there's that eternal flame link too that Sarah and I had discussed when we were looking at this. I think that's a great observation.
Yes, that's excellent. Yeah. So I think that you have thought of many different things. I've also was thinking that it was, the flame was in memory of those slaves who were mutilated or killed by Sims. That she's an angel. Maybe it's a symbol for the people who had been killed. And looking to the future, all of those things I definitely think come into this. So thank you again so much for participating. We are now going to continue on to a set of sculptures that, like this one, has a lot of symbolic meaning. Can we have the next slide? Ola Rondiak, the artist, is a Ukrainian American who is steeped in Ukrainian culture. These sculptures that we see in front of us are called motankas. In Rondiak's own words, my motanka sculptures are inspired by the ancient Ukrainian dolls, which were passed down from mother to daughter as a talisman of good health and fortune. In the collection of 12 motankas on display in the gallery, a variety of themes are represented. And you can see them all at the bottom of the slide, but just to say a few: reflection, patriotism, our heroes, very small motankas, which you see in the background, done in black with silver accents, on the rope motanka on the left at the back. So there's a variety of them, and it's really wonderful to take a few moments to really look at the different materials that are used, the different fabrics, the writing, the images. It's really a lovely exhibit. Rondiak continues in this fashion as she talks about this exhibit. The history of these pre-Christian, hard-woven rag dolls resonates deeply with me. My contemporary motanka sculptures are symbolic of a protectress, a unifier, and a healer of runes. For this reason, I chose to create them from plaster of Paris, as it is the same material we use to make casts to protect broken bones as they heal. Specific to this installation, she says, is the grouping of these works together to form a motanka army. As we approach, we can see they are unarmed, and their female strength comes from standing together and supporting one another, allowing each one to stay unique to themselves. I love this idea of an army of individuals bonded together by the support they give and receive from each other. To me, that is true strength, and like that of a traditional army that all wear the same uniform and use force. That's my take on it. But as you can see, when you look at these in the gallery, it's just a wonderful display. Perhaps you'll have a chance to see it. The last of the sculptures we will see today is very different in feeling. From this folk art inspired sculpture, we go to another piece that is very classical in form. So let's see the next sculpture. Now, this sculpture was done by Camille Esquel, and she has titled it Tattooed Lady, Coming Up Roses. As you can see, she starts by sculpting a bust that is very classical in form, very beautiful. The bust is tattooed with roses from shoulder to rib. And there are flowers, it's tattooed with flowers, with roses, which are traditionally symbols of beauty and life. But all of this seems to be at odds with the rest of the sculpture. What else do you see here? Yes, you can see a gaping hole in the belly that winds upward, cleaving the chest apart. And let's go to the next slide and we'll have a detail so you can really focus in on that. So you can see also the teeth that line parts of the opening at various intervals. What are we to make of this? What is this wound? Are the teeth hers, or are they symbolic of wounds made by others? Why has she created such tension within the work? The tension between the classical bust of the woman, beautifully done with the roses, happiness and life, and then we see this gaping hole with teeth all over. Think about the significance of the title also. Is it Coming Up Roses? I'm going to leave you with those thoughts, and perhaps you can address your thoughts. You can put your thoughts in the chat, and and maybe we can talk about that more afterwards. Okay, so the next group of artworks we are going to see are all portraits. Women have expanded their repertoire. Here we have a range of portraits done in a variety of different mediums. Each tells its own story. So let's go to the next slide, please. I wanted you to see these two portraits side by side because they're both photographs and yet they are very, very different. I'll let you look for a moment to see how many differences you can find. I think what's immediately visible is that one is done in black and white and the other is done in color. The one on the left is a photograph of Martha Graham, a highly renowned, innovative modern dancer and choreographer. The photo was taken by Barbara Morgan, known for her penetrating studies of dancers, and it was done in 1940. In this portrait, Barbara Morgan was able to catch Martha Graham at the fullest extension of her kick, so it's truly an amazing photograph. The other one on the right was done by Mary Frey. She did this one in color, and this was done in 2004. Mary Frey was exploring the nature of the documentary image in contemporary photography. To that end, she engaged her friends and family to pose for her in particularly banal situations. This one, though posed, is not banal. I'm going to invite you again into a discussion. So again, feel free to put your thoughts into the chat, or you can raise your hand and you can speak. Would you care to speculate on the relationship between the two people in the photo on the right? Yeah, I realize now that actually I don't have to ask that question because the title of the piece gives, tells you.
Yeah.
So yes.
Sarah,
yes.
actually, as you asked the question, Annette mentioned in the chat that it was grandson and grandma.
Yes, absolutely. So yes, this is Mary Frey's son and her mother. So grandmother and grandson. Yes. So what do you think you know about this woman, the grandmother?
Annette also had written in the chat that the old woman seems very frail.
Yes, and that's a very interesting comment. So let's contrast her frailty with Martha Graham.
Yeah, Annette also, this is all part of this one comment that I think was really right on. She said the vitality of Graham really contrasts with the frailness of the older woman. And Frederica just mentioned that the photo on the right has a very tender and compassionate sort of feeling that's evoked.
Yes.
And Barbara says that Graham almost appears to be flying, equaling freedom, and the other, I think, of confinement.
Yes, excellent. I don't have to even ask the questions. Yes, I love how you're talking about the feeling that it gives you, and I'm going to invite you to dig even more deeply into it. Look at the backgrounds, contrast the backgrounds in the two pieces, contrast the expressions on the faces, and tell me more about your feelings as you're looking at these.
We have a comment from Catherine, who says that the Graham portrait shows a lot of life and strength, and then on the right, the grandmother and grandson, it's much more deeply emotional in some ways. And I think probably that has something to do with their pose as well as what you just asked in terms of what's their expression might be on their faces.
Right. And just so you know, in fact, this was the Mary Frey photograph was a pose. It was posed, but it was taken after this actually happened. It kind of happened. Her son picked up her mother and was holding her. And then she realized that this is something that she had to memorialize. So she asked the two of them if they would, pose, and she took the shot. I'm thinking about, and I did want you to know that this her mother died the year that this photo was taken. So really, this is also a contrast between sort of end of life and, you know, the middle of life when you're full of vigor and strength and vitality.
What it reminds me of is, am I speaking now? I don't know how this works, but
Yes, you are. We can hear you.
okay. Well, I'm thinking that one looks like a very public photograph, and the other is a very private photograph, like one that we might have in our own collection. And those tend to give us much more of an emotional reaction. Like this one is very filled with memories we might relate to, but the other one is a very professionally public photograph, I call it.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yes.
my
Yes, I think
Sarah, I wanted to tell you this is sort of follows that comment because Sue mentioned when you had posed the question about the backgrounds of the photos, how the photo on the right, the woman was so loved. It's evident by the cards and the notes and the pictures that are on the mirror. So I think that connects to what we just heard about professional versus intimate staging.
right, right, excellent. I love that, and I think that also speaks to the background as being a very important part of the photo on the right, because it gives you context. You know that this is taken in a home. You see the bed, you know that she's been lifted out of bed. You see the closet, you see the cards. It is informal, it is intimate. And on the contrast, Martha Graham is a performer. And I think the very bare stage really highlights her pose. The black, the dark against the white, the contrast really allows you to see the lines of her body. I'm wondering about the expressions on the two women's faces. Does anybody have any thoughts or comments about that? How do you see that? Okay, I'm noticing that both of them have their eyes closed, but Mary Frey's mother seems very relaxed and calm, maybe not feeling well. And Martha Graham, though her eyes are closed, there's an intensity. If when I look closely, I think that she's, you know, she's worried, she's upset. There's like something going on within her, maybe a conflict within her. So, which actually works in terms of the dance that she's doing.
Sarah, before I move on, there was a couple other interesting observations.
Sure. I'd love to hear them.
Yeah, from Frederica. So she mentioned that the Martha Graham piece image is so graceful. It reminds her of a swan about to take flight. And that the photograph of mother and grandson, or mother and son, or grandmother and grandson, in the background are doors that are opening up to darkness. So that's very interesting, I think.
Yes, it could be very symbolic. Yes.
And then Sarah Linda followed up the comment about gracefulness in the Graham by saying, there's also a gracefulness in the image of grandmother and grandson because the curvature of the spine, it kind of echoes the curve of the kick and the skirt in the kick photograph. So they both are exhibiting grace in very different ways.
Right, right. One, Martha Graham's an extension and she is cuddled up. So the reverse curve. I love the comments. Thank you all so much for sharing your ideas. We probably could go on even further, but let's move on. We're going to now look at a set of portraits that are self-portraits. We haven't seen self-portraits before. There's a set of 3 that we're going to look at, all done by Julia Santos Solomon. Each portrait stands on its own and has something to say, but together I think they really make a story. So let's look at the next slide. Okay, so this is Julia Santos Solomon, her sculpture, and this is her at the age of 4. Isn't it charming? She was born in the Dominican Republic. When she was 4, her mother and her aunt immigrated to the United States, leaving her to live with her grandmother. Notice the intensity of the color that the acrylic paint brings to the sculpture. Notice all the lovely bows in her hair. This is how young girls were presented in that era, Santos Solomon tells us. How do you read the expression on this little girl's face? It's definitely an intensity to it, isn't there? Imagine how a 4-year-old would feel being separated from her mother. I can't help but reflect on this sculpture's relevance to what has happened in the United States recently. Let's move to the next slide now. This is the second of Solomon's self-portraits, and it was done when she was 9 years old. But this one is a digital print. Instead of a full-face portrait, we now see a profile, but the expression is no less intense. What does her expression convey to you? This portrait was done on Julia's 9th birthday. Not only was her family still separated, but a civil war had broken out in the Dominican Republic. It was a very sad time for the family, and it was her birthday. To try to compensate, her grandmother made her a polka dot blouse. She has purposely rendered it in a happy yellow as a contrast to the sadness of the times. Let's look at the background now. The background is gold leaf. And for Santos Solomon, the gold leaf refers to the gold that European conquerors took from Hispaniola, now the Dominican Republic. She is reappropriating it by including it in this portrait, claiming it as her own. She uses the gold leaf for her portrait as well, so it's not only the background, but it runs through the actual portrait, suggesting that she, like the gold, has great worth. And she, like the gold, sparkles and shines. Lastly, we will look at the portrait she did of herself as an adult. Next slide, please. This is a digital print on metal. This portrait is a full-on frontal view of her face, beautifully executed. How do you read the expression on her face now? Definitely very intense. I think we can say that all 3 of them, her expression is very intense. So I'd like to really focus on the background. Thank you, Bridget. Well, let's go back for, well, let's look at this one for just a minute. Let's consider the background of this portrait. What do we see here? It's clear that it's a very tropical place. We can see the leaves and the flowers, very, very tropical looking. That's probably in her native Dominican Republic, and she now lives in the US. The thing is, the background doesn't really seem to end in the background, does it? It really pervades the face. You can see how the leaves come into the face. So that's a very interesting way to do it. Wonder why she did that. Why would she have done that? I'm going to throw out what she said, and maybe you were thinking this, and maybe you were thinking of something else. She says, I wanted to create an image where the background and the figure were the same. I am in the landscape, and the landscape is in me. She titled this piece, let's go to the next slide so you can look at all of them together, the whole series. But she titled this piece, the last one, Caribbean Thoughts Mashup. And I think the mashup refers to the fact that the background goes into the actual portrait and to symbolize how she and her country are really one. She is in it and the country is in her. We are now coming to our last portrait. It's similar to the 9-year-old mashup with the gold leaf background, in that the artist uses a lot of yellow. As you look at it, consider why you think the artist chose this color. Next slide. This portrait is by Jessica Spence. She calls it Sunday Evening. Excuse me. Sorry. Just give me a second. Sorry. It was done in 2017. Now, what is this portrait about? We can see a child sitting in a chair, and we can see the hands and part of the body of someone who is braiding her hair. The artist's focus appears to be on the hair. What are your reactions when you look at the braided hair? I think it looks beautiful, and the addition of the white braids serves to highlight the braid and the darkness of the hair. Clearly, the artist is making a statement about Black hair. This is one of a series of paintings she made of Black women's hair. As she states, she made these in response to the negative reactions and chastising that many natural-haired Black women experience in spaces such as the workplace or in schools. Despite some negative remarks and attitudes towards natural hair, many women now embrace their hair and wear it proudly. Jessica Spence titled this piece Sunday Evening because many Black children have their hair braided by a loved one, such as a mother or an aunt, on a Sunday night in preparation for the upcoming school week. It has a very intimate feeling. These are moments of bonding, and the yellow background to me seems to suggest happiness and peace and intimacy. And yet, we don't see the face of the child in this portrait. So can we really call it a portrait? And I'm going to ask you again to please respond to this, either by speaking or by raising your hand. Do you think this is a portrait? And why do you think that Jessica Spence omitted the face? She states that this was a calculated choice. So why did she do that?
Did she call it a portrait?
Don't know whether she called it a portrait. I guess I called it a portrait.
Uh-huh.
So
Because,
maybe,
Oh, I'm sorry. Please speak.
no, it just seemed to me to be a question. I don't know if she would even call it a portrait. Because it's really it's every little girl getting her hair braided, and it's a social commentary, and it's got a lot of, I think it's absolutely beautiful. I don't see it as a portrait personally.
mhm.
And we have a comment here from Annette in the chat that says there's no faces because you can imagine anyone there. And from Catherine, because the child could be anyone and everyone. So
Right.
it adds to the debate.
Yes, and I think that that actually was her intention. She really wanted to pull the viewer in, and people, so that without a discernible face, people could relate to this more easily. They could see themselves in this space. So I think that both of you have really hit on it.
Jane Reed says that she would call it a study.
Mhm.
And then Frederica is commenting not so much on the face or lack thereof, but on the hands. And the hands of the person who does the braid show tenderness and skill.
Yeah.
And then Sarah Linda is adding to the conversation in the chat. She's saying, I'm looking at the title of the series, and the title of the series that this work is part of is called It's a Process. So maybe it's a portrait in process of both the little girl and the person who's braiding his or her hair, as it's a relationship being developed through the process.
That's an interesting thought too. Yeah, that could very well be. I did look at some of the other works in this series, and there are others that don't show a face, but there are some that do show a face. So I guess, it's, I don't know that it's definitive, but I know that she did definitely say that that her intent was to make this more relatable by not putting a face on it so that anybody could relate to it. And I love Frederica's comment about the intimacy and the gentleness. And I love the contrast of the softness of the hair and the hands, and contrasting with the beautiful braiding. So it is a lovely portrait. Thank you again for your thoughts and your comments. Portraiture is not the only way that an artist can represent herself. So the next work of art is very self-expressive, yet it's not a portrait. And I hear that we're not really convinced that this is definitely a portrait. So let's take a look at this next work, which definitely is not a portrait and yet is very expressive. Let's see the next slide. This was done by Judy Vieira in 2019. Let's take a few moments to really look at this work of art. It takes a little time to really see what's in the work. So I've asked, let's look at this for just another minute and see what you can pull out of this, what you can see, what objects you can identify. And then I'm going to ask Bridget to move to the next slides where we've highlighted and blown up some of the areas so you can see better. So Bridget, can you show us the next slide? Okay, here we go. So now it's really clear that we have panties and we have a bra and we have what looks like sort of a denim halter top and we have tights that run across on a diagonal in this piece. We have strings or yarn that run through the piece. We also have like a wad of strings, black strings that you can see in the upper right. Thank you, Bridget. And and we have the scissors, a repeated motif, so we can see the scissors. So you just looked at this. You've never seen this before. What do you make of this? Have any thoughts? I'm not asked.
I think she needs a closet company.
What?
She needs a closet company to organize her underwear.
Yes, interesting. Good thought. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about her. Well, I'm going to, and you probably see this. If you notice the title, it says Just a Tea Girl from Brooklyn. So just to be sure everyone's on the same page, a tea girl is a transgender person.
Ah, okay. Very interesting.
So that, I think, helps to elucidate a little bit more what's going on in this. Let me continue by telling you some more about Judy Vieira, and this is in her own words. While I had been on hormone replacement therapy for 2.5 years at this point, I was still considered by many and myself to be very early in my transition. Obviously, transition from male to female. And by the way, all these pieces of clothing were pieces of clothing that she actually wore. I was beginning to find that through medical gatekeeping around transition, I was forced to grapple with many choices about my daily gender expression. That is, how femme do I want to present? Am I comfortable in panties and bras? What about dresses? As well as the extent to which I would physically alter my body to bring it more closely in alignment with my gender identity. This work in particular grappled with my decisions around top and bottom surgery, represented here through the presence of bras and panties, as well as the black scissor motif that occurs across the canvas. This work is in fact an extremely intimate piece of self-expression, though we have no representative of Judy's physical self. So I think it's very clear now what this piece is about. And I was talking with Bridget about it, and we were wondering about all the strings. I mean, I would think that the strings of hair, the black hair on the left, that's probably representative of a woman's hair. But the other strings, and Bridget made a really interesting comment, and she said maybe the strings represented unraveling, that this was an unraveling of who she was. And I think that was an interesting thought. So, and then now if we think back to where we started, where women were only supposed to do still lives, I think this piece by Judy Vieira makes a wonderful statement about how far women artists have come. We've come a long way. So we are coming to the end of our tour. We have one last work of art to share. It brings our tour full circle because it reprises some of the themes we saw in our first work of art, Garden of the Divine Feminine. So I'm going to ask for the last slide. And this piece is by Judy Chicago. Judy Chicago is a feminist, iconic artist who, from the 70s and beyond, and this work reflects the very feminine thrust of her work. She calls this piece Guided by the Goddess. The goddess floats above the earth, as I suppose goddesses do, and it's clear she is the source of nourishment for the people in the painting. Some are being fed by her breasts, others are clamoring, striving to reach her. Emanating from her head are waves that connect to the bodies on land. It appears that the goddess and the people on earth are all interconnected. As in the Garden of the Divine Feminine, Judy Chicago is celebrating the role of women. Women are the source, women are divine. The artist says of this work, "My goal as an artist has been to create images in which the female experience is the path to the universal, as opposed to learning everything through the male gaze." And isn't that what this whole exhibit has been about? Women expanding their artistic reach into all kinds of media and self-expression, following their hearts and minds in spite of the patriarchal system of the art world. In this exhibition, the Hudson River Museum celebrates, supports, and encourages the achievements of female and female identifying artists. So I want to thank you for coming, and I also want to just convey my thanks to Bridget McCormick, who has worked with me to manage the technical aspects of this tour, but also to be a springboard for thoughts and ideas, coming up with suggestions that I really welcomed. She was always ready to help and work tirelessly to make this tour the best I could make it. Thank you so much for coming. I don't know if we have time for questions and answers. You'll tell me, Bridget.
I actually think, well, thank you. And thank you for doing all the research and planning with this with us. And I know Sara Linda, before people officially signed off, wanted to mention a couple things, and then we can stay on the call for a few minutes to see if anyone else wants to just have some reflections about this. So Sara Linda, feel free to jump in and fill people in about some other things that are going on.
Hey, thank you, Bridget. And I just want to once more thank Sara for such a masterful tour. And thank you, Sara, for bringing the audience in such an engaging way. And thank you, everyone in the audience, for participating. I feel this was just a wonderful, really organic process. And after I just make a few comments, please, whoever can stay on, please do so, and we can continue the conversation. It's just like being in the gallery in an exhibition with you, Sara, and I want to thank Bridget for working with you, through this, and it shows. It's just I was thrilled with it, so thank you again. I just really, if you like this, this experience, I just wanted to mention a few more things that are coming up in December. I am actually, as I'm speaking to you, looking at our calendar up on our website, in which everything is described, but we have two really exciting weekends coming up. This coming weekend on Saturday, the 12th at 4 o'clock, we have our virtual holiday spectacular, Broadway Comes to Glenview. And having worked yesterday with, on the rehearsal with Olivia, I can tell you it is a spectacular. We are featuring dancers who have danced with the Rockettes, and Jackie B, who played La Chocolat in Moulin Rouge, the musical, dancing and singing up a storm in Glenview with our decorations, our holiday decorations as a background. So that's going to be Saturday at 4. Sunday at 1:30, we have a virtual studio visit with Alison Mortsugu. Some of you may be familiar with her work. It is featured in our exhibition Landscape Art and Virtual Travel, which was done in collaboration with Art Bridges. And this is going to be a very rare and unique glimpse of the artist's work in her studio. And she'll be speaking with our curator, Laura Vukels. So that is Sunday at 1:30. And the following weekend, particularly relevant to this experience, we have a conversation, Our Art, Ourselves. Artists embrace their roles in the community and beyond. And this is going to be a panel moderated by our director, Masha Turchinsky, with the 3 muralists with whom Sara began the tour. These are public art muralists, Katori Walker, Patricia Santos, and Nancy Mendez, talking about what it means to be a woman and the many different guises that that it takes. So that is going to be a very, I think, a very moving and interesting conversation. So that's Saturday the 19th at 2 o'clock. And then on Sunday, we have our next docent tour, which is going to be of landscape art and virtual travel. So, so please, we hope to see you again soon. And remember that we are open actually to the public Thursday through Sundays from 12 to 5. And we are offering tours of Glenview decorated for the holidays. These are ticketed tours, Friday, Saturday, Sunday at 1, 2, and 3 p.m. So we look forward to seeing you virtually and seeing you in person. And now back to the matter at hand. And thank you all.
Linda. I see Bruce had his hand raised. I'm going to unmute him and see if Bruce wanted to ask a question or make a comment. Maybe he's not there anymore, but Bruce, oh, there you are. Feel free to jump in.
No, I didn't need to ask a question.
Okay, no problem. I saw the hand up.
you.
So I wanted to make sure that you didn't want to say anything. So yeah, we'll be on for a few more minutes if anyone wants to follow up or ask any specific questions. Sue, thank you. Sue just mentioned in the chat, you can look at our website if you needed a reminder of any of the programs that Sara Linda just ran by everyone. So we hope to see you back. We're trying to do a real mix of on-site as well as virtual programming, and hope that you take advantage of whatever you might feel comfortable engaging with. So are there any outstanding questions about any of the works or any comments that anyone didn't get to make that maybe you want to jump in and make now? We're definitely happy to hear them. And maybe Olivia, what I'll do, Frederica asked if the tour is recorded. What we're going to do is we are going to be translating the Facebook live stream of this program onto our YouTube channel, after which it will be available as a recording. And we'll make sure to share that out via social media and other mechanisms so you can watch it.
Okay, we don't have any comments or questions on Facebook. I know that some people were wondering about the Braille on the Vinnie Bagwell sculpture, and we couldn't find any exact text for that, but we did find a quote from the Instagram live she did with us about it. She said, "It is a visual for those of us that can see, kind of like scarification on Africans. But for people that are blind, they can touch that and know that it says something." And to me, I think that's very powerful, which is, I think, a wonderful quote to kind of end with, if anybody has any other questions.
No, we're Getting some really nice feedback. Thanks for all your kind comments. Sarah, everyone really appreciated your tour and all the conversation we had around these pieces. I mean, we could talk about them for hours, but hopefully maybe you got exposed to some artists you weren't familiar with, or maybe you heard something a little different about some well-established people, you know, like your O'Keeffes and so on. So we're glad people enjoyed it.
And one other thing I just want to mention, I really hope that many of you can come and visit us at the museum during a timed slot and see not only the pieces that Sarah chose to discuss, but the ones that couldn't fit into this time, because it's over 40 artists. So for every piece she discussed, there's one that fills in the space in between, which would really extend the conversation. So we hope to see you.
And just so everyone knows, this exhibit closes January 8th, right, Sarah Linda?
I think it's the 3rd.
Oh, the 3rd, I'm sorry. So Sue, yeah, January 3rd, just after the new year. So there's a few weeks left to come see it in person if you're comfortable doing that.
Yep. Oh, and by the way, during the week between Christmas and New Year's, we will be open on days we generally are not, Monday and Tuesday. So that week we're open Monday through Thursday. And with the timed, there are 3 timed slots during which you can come, but we'll also be having the Glenview tours at 1, 2, and 3 each of those days. So once again, we hope to see you.
Thank you, Sarah Linda.
Welcome.
So again, I think the organizers and Sarah will stay on for a bit, but everyone else, please feel free to sign off whenever you're ready. And we hope to see you again soon on the screen or in person, or
Thank you and happy holidays.
Happy
Happy holidays, everybody. Have a wonderful day.